At this time, we'll call the Policy Committee to order, April 4th, 2023, held on April 4th, 2023. What is this? April.
April 4th, 2023.
You gonna stand for this one?
No.
Yeah, okay. Today's... All right, we're going to review and consider the request for qualifications on RFQ forms for architects and engineers. Mr. Terry?
You can call up whatever you control the
We have what we have before us is the request for qualifications. We have the core documents really are, we have a request for qualifications, architect services for projects with available funds for construction under $500,000. So those would be anything from $50,000 to $500,000. And then we have the Tangible Fair School System guidelines for procuring professional services for capital and other projects. And then we also have the instruction sheet for the application form for architect and design services. And then the actual application that's filled out and turned in.
Okay, any questions?
Question. Can we back up a little bit, Terry, and just, why are we doing this? Because we've never had to do it before. What brought us to this point? Because some people speculate that we're trying to fire somebody or we're trying to hire new people. Just go ahead and clear the air on why are we getting to this point? What are we trying to accomplish?
What we want to accomplish is a spirit of competition. Because we're going after federal monies and current federal money that we're going after. TPSS and ESSER funds and all the federal programs say that you need a spirit of competition. If we don't have a spirit of competition, then we forfeit all of those design fees. So there is no program established for that. So recognizing that and coming from programs that had this type of competition and this type of program, that's why I want to introduce that here to the Tangible Fair School System so we can recognize all the free money back to us that and that's available.
And Mr. Madam President,
Go ahead.
I have one question too. Is all these documents, like I said, they're pretty lengthy and they're kind of very well worded. Where did you get these documents? Did we reuse these documents? Where did the documentation come from for this policy?
The policy is directly from state FP&C. We just tailored it and put Tangible Fair School System's name on it so that it can be formally for Tangible Fair School System, but it's straight from state FP&C.
So it's been reviewed by attorneys and all that good stuff already?
It's from their website, and I'm sure their attorneys help put that together.
Okay. And then second and last question is this going to lengthen any of our processes for like construction or anything like that? Is this going to make the process longer for maybe like some smaller projects for local, or is it?
No, sir, because what will happen is we'll have architects on board that successfully win from answering the questions from 50,000 to 500,000, and we'll have, say, right now I'm thinking that we'll pick 3, and there'll be a contract for 3 years. And when they answer those questions, they're meeting the spirit of competition. And then those guys, when we have a project that comes up, say a playground for $50,000, we give it to architect A. Or we have another remodel of a classroom building or a building, and that's handed to classroom or to architect B. And then we just keep going at rotation. And there's also a provision in there from the architects that did turn in their proper documentation. If we need to get a 4th and 5th architect from that list, that these documents are set up to go ahead. If we have the bandwidth and we recognize more projects are coming on board than what the architects can handle at that. And that's from the 50 to 500,000. Now bumping up to our 7 that's coming up, that's over $500,000. We're going to do this for each project. So each of the 7, there's a potential of having 7 different architects come on board. But we're going to use the same qualifications, but it's going to be over $500,000. So for each one of these projects, like the 18 classroom addition at Ponchatoula High School, that criteria and that design narrative that describes that, what y'all decide on, will be in this RFQ, and that'll go out on the street create a spirit of competition, then the architects can answer these questions and successfully turn it in, and then we'll have our winner from there. And we'll do that 7 times, based on these 7 projects that are coming up.
Realistically, how fast can that happen, like for a big project?
Give 30 days, and then we have our committee to review and weigh it out, so, give a week or so with that, so say 40, 45 days, and then we're up and running.
Question.
Go ahead.
So, all right, so I some of what you already said answered some of my questions, and I appreciate that. So then, as I understand it, you're going to do RFQs. It sounds like maybe 8 different RFQs will be going out. One for a pool of architects that we will use for smaller projects,
Yes, sir.
right? And then an RFQ for each of the 7 big projects that the board has already approved for us to go forward on, and that the court has already approved. That's the phase 2 projects.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so then, we're going to send that out. We're going to get those responses. And then I guess the part of what I'm confused about is then what happens next, because I'm not sure what we're approving tonight, so that's going to be my next question. But just talking about your process that you envision, when does it come back for the board to actually approve us entering into contracts with these architects?
Tonight, we're asking to put this to advertise this, okay?
To send the RFQs out?
Right, to send RFQs out.
Okay.
And then when the RFQs for the big projects, I think that's your concern, when the RFQs come back, then the winning architect, he'll be charged with designing programming documents, where there'll be a floor plan and an estimate value based on today's numbers. And then that floor plan and that cost estimate will come back to y'all.
Right. So I guess what I'm concerned about, so typically when we've done RFQs, or at least the ones I've had experience with, the administration may score, y'all would send out with a scoring rubric as far as how y'all are going to score all of these RFQs, and then the administration would come back to the board with a recommendation on who would be hired for that contract. These are big contracts,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so,
Based on the weight of scores.
correct. And then we've of course had issues where maybe the board wanted to hire somebody else other than who the administration recommended, and then there was
Up to the board.
right. But that's what was unclear to me in the procedures. It did not appear to me that if we adopted these procedures that it would ever come back to the
Oh,
board.
yeah, yes, sir, I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
I skipped over that,
So
because there's a page on here that tells you the weights on them.
Like 30 different things.
Yeah,
But the way that I'm reading, like section 9 for evaluation criteria, and then it talks about a committee that would be the selector of who gets the contract. And I didn't see anything in here about, okay, well, when does the board get to weigh in on,
We can bring it back to the board after the committee. After the committee would weigh out the numbers, we can bring that back to
right, but that's not in,
I
right, I mean, unless I missed it, okay.
That's why we're doing this.
Yeah, okay. All right, so, and maybe not for the smaller projects, maybe we have a different procedure, because, where we have that pool and then the administration is just picking from the pool. I mean, and that was what I envisioned when you and I originally talked about this, that there would be like a process where we would have this pool, we would have a competitive process to create the pool, then for smaller projects, we just are blowing and going, let's get those things done. But then for big projects, we would do this RFQ, and then, but the board would get an opportunity to make it. I mean, is that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. All right, well, I'll pause and okay, well, no, just want to, tonight, would it be possible for us to do something tonight? Because I don't want to hold up getting RFQs out there. I think let's get RFQs out there, But can we work on getting, maybe tweaking this procedure so that we're all in agreement on how we want this thing to go going forward? Like, I mean, does the board need to approve a procedure before we can at least get the RFQs advertised and out there?
I don't know that the board needs to approve a procedure, but y'all are welcome to.
Well, I mean,
Let me jump in. I would say if you approve this tonight, we can go ahead and advertise. And then when it comes back to the full board for you to adopt this committee report, you can make that change in that
So-
procedure. Is that possible?
well, but when you say approve this tonight, like, I'm not comfortable approving guidelines and procedures that, I mean, I'd like for us to work on that some more, but we could approve like your RFQ, like the advertising.
Just the advertising.
Okay.
We can go ahead and advertise and then.
And
we
get-
can go
get
ahead
going.
And work on
The procedures and how we're gonna run this thing? That's something y'all would be okay with?
yes, sir.
Okay. All right, I'm stopping
At
there.
the end of the day, y'all approve this.
Well, but it doesn't say that, so. so-
Can we just amend that, Ken?
I was
Well,
going to
but-
say, do we need to do an amendment to this?
Well, I don't think we can just amend it, because there's not a separate process for smaller versus bigger. There's not I mean, there's a lot of things that, in these guidelines, that I have a lot of questions about, as far as just edging the board out of the process, that I'd like for us to be able to have conversations about and actually craft something that we're all comfortable with, before we just approve something.
Yes, Ms. Rose?
Okay, first off, my question is, you were mentioning about the federal funds. So are you expecting these to be for local funds and federal dollars? Because if we don't need it for local funds in order, because the fee schedule is the same. It doesn't, it's a spirit of competition. Of course, we want, our people to be good and pass the test or whatever you want them to pass. But in a sense, it doesn't matter if it's just local funds. There's no fees, all the same. By state law, it's the same fee.
The only thing I would say on that, and I've got experience in this, a project may start with local funds, and then you find
It may end with
there are federal funds available. So if you start with competitive pricing on everything, you can always then claw federal funds for the project. But if you don't do that, and we've kind of run into this with phase two. Phase two was started with local funds. Well, now ESSER funds are available, and so we had to hit the pause button in order to procure the architects so that their fee could be paid by federal funds instead of having to use local funds. So I would recommend, particularly this small, y'all are gonna approve this pool of architects, and we will have this competitive pricing in place. No matter what type of project it is, you know that you can use federal funds. And it's gonna be similar to, we're gonna be, the electrical contractor. Everything that we use, if we will do the work ahead of time and go ahead and have procurement done, then it doesn't matter what funds you're using. You can use that vendor, whether it's federal funds, state funds, or local. So that's why we're recommending to have this competitive, process in place.
No, but Jeff, the pricing is the same
Yeah.
for everybody. It's not a pricing question, right? The questions in the RFQ are,
It says qualifications.
Right,
What
the-
you're doing is you're measuring qualifications. One of those has to do with presence, one of those has to do with history working with the school system, it has to do with familiarity with the projects. There's a lot of things, with regard to the qualifications.
Okay.
Years of experience in those type of projects, you don't wanna have hire an architect to build a nuclear plant and then you
Got 'em.
and did we have the scoring rubric? Did y'all give us like how y'all are gonna score this? Is that going out to I'm sorry, Robin.
That's okay. Go ahead.
That was gonna be my next question. It says it's gonna be on a point scale, but there is no point scale attached.
Are they all equal, or you put more weight on?
Or there are 30 some odd things in this deal, and is that technically required by state law? Because from what I've heard, the state doesn't have that many criterias. Why are we adding 30 criterias and not just following basic state process?
He pulled this from the state.
This
This
is
is
straight
their
from-
criteria. This is their criteria, but with our name on it.
There's not 30, there's 30 things in section 9 but we didn't get it. It says it's gonna be a score sheet, but we didn't technically get a sore sheet.
There's 30 places for names.
Yeah.
No, she's talking about in section 9, like whether the proposer, the workload, like it names a bunch of different things.
Evaluation of proposal qualifications, and it's evaluation criteria, but it, I mean, it's a long list, but where's the points, or, I mean, where are you getting the points from? Or is there a Rubik's? You said you were gonna have a Rubik's, but we didn't get that.
Let me see, there was some extra things.
I mean, I saw the evaluation
I can get the rubric for you.
in the, I'm just curious, because that's an awful lot of criteria to be scored, and then, you know, who's scoring it? Somewhere in here it says the director is the last call, but I mean, I don't know if it really should be a committee, I think, as Brett said already. It shouldn't be just a one-person thing.
Well, that's what Brett's amendment was gonna be, is when we
Yeah,
come back to that, it does have board approval for that final bid process, and like I said, that's an iron that we already kind of looked at, but
Make sure the rubric's in.
what, Miss Robin?
Go ahead.
What I did want to mention is what Mr. Jeff said. I know a lot of it is about connection and previous history with some architects and the relationship we built with those architects, but I want to say something that Mr. McNeely hit on is a lot of this criteria that is on here, our architects we have hit a lot of those dockets, so I don't see where it's going to limit their chances of being in that pool or being part of the big bids, because let's face it, a lot of the architects we use are top in their fields. I don't see where that might hinder them at all. I think if anything, it only strengthens their bonds because, like you said, the knowledge of the buildings in our area, the being big in your industry, most of our architects are already there. They're able to do that. This come right from the state website. If the state's good enough to adopt this, and their budget is way more than ours, well, I don't think we should have a ton of problem, other than maybe some minor little tweaks, in which I'm agreeing with Brett about having board approval, because that is a big deal, you know, because sometimes you may have the lowest bidder, but they might not have the best qualification. Well, any committee's always going to pick the lowest bidder. But sometimes you might want to weigh in, well, you know, this guy also has 30 years, this guy's got 5.
Responsive and responsive.
Right, you know, and so I do agree that might need to be, that should be amended in there, but other than that, I mean, I would like to see a rubric sheet. But I wanted to make that clear to people watching that, you know, we do have relationships with local architects and local firms that we do want to make sure we still cultivate, because as a business owner, I make relationships with businesses and they give me better products because we have a relationship. That's not getting thrown out of the window with this pool. I think if anything, it strengthens their ability to get into the pool.
I'm still thinking that we need to make some kind of amendment to this.
This is not a, so look, I don't think this is an amendable document. I mean, you're talking about the big procedures and guidelines. I mean, that would be a big amendment to me.
No, I'm not talking about the actual document. I'm talking about, we should be considering
Okay.
just the RFQ.
All right, here's a motion. You want a motion?
Yes,
Wait, I'm-
please, Mr. Duncan.
Make a motion, I'm
Talking
still
about
got
the
questions.
application, the instructions.
Well, that's what I was gonna say.
know,
Before we do questions, I am comfortable with moving forward, authorizing the administration to issue a RFQ with the instruction sheet and the application sheet that was attached to the agenda. I don't see any issue with that, along with the understanding that the RFQ will come back to the board for any sort of final approval. So that does not approve, that motion would not approve the guidelines or the procedures. That would be something that we would have to do some additional conversation.
Push that to the capital outlay committee coming on with those revisions,
If we can get the amendments,
if we can get the amendments done in time.
yeah.
That way we're not wasting time, and we can, because again, we don't want to drag our feet if we're looking at big projects either.
So what is the state of So what is the actual state of emergency that we're dealing with right here? I keep hearing, you know, if we don't get this done, if we don't get that done,
Because if we don't have this in place, we can't secure architects for phase 2 or 3, under what the administration is asking.
Okay.
because they're ESSER funds, you have to have a competitive bid process for ESSER funds or federal funds. That they're trying to make sure that we have that system in place. So in order to do that, it's kind of on a timely matter in case we had other big projects down the pipeline.
Okay, so are we asking for amendments to the instruction, the procedure, and the application? We're asking for a
So
total
we're amending that.
overhaul?
We'll allow him to go ahead and send out RFQs for the small pool, but we're asking to amend it to say for the rest of those documents, for the bigger projects, we have some tweaks and changes that need to be ironed out in that from the board members. So we're gonna go ahead and approve this one and send this one back to the drawing board. Let's make some tweaks, and then we'll put it at either another policy committee or at the capital outlay.
Now, my motion would approve us sending RFQs out for all 8 RFQs using the instruction sheet and the application that was presented.
Oh, so
What it does
For
not
big and
approve-
small.
Big and small.
For big and small, what it does not approve is the guidelines that he issued or the procedures that he issued as far as what will happen after we get these RFQ responses back. I think that's something that we ought to continue to work on as a board.
How long does it take to get the RFQs back?
30 days.
30 days? Okay, so we have time to tweak this document
Right.
that he has right here.
Right.
So,
This whole 11, 12-page document, just gonna, somebody volunteering to go through this and line item it and add lines in? Do you feel comfortable being able to do that? I mean, I'm sure you can.
Yeah, I mean, if the board wants me to work on that, I'll be glad to take the lead on it and see what, see if we can help.
Work with the administration.
And, yeah, with the administration and try to help build consensus on a process that we're all comfortable.
I don't even know if you're on this committee, but I mean, that would be up to you, who you assign to do that. Is it a committee within the committee?
It's everybody's
that takes
on
this
it.
stuff?
this is a committee,
We're all on.
oh, it's a whole.
Gotcha.
Oh, you got a motion for that, to approve that?
Well,
I'll
I just-
I'm gonna second that motion.
Okay, well, that's what I was doing.
So Brett, you
So
would
Mr. Brett,
forward
Made the motion.
suggestions to the committee before
Mr. Westmoreland
we
second the motion
come to, yeah.
to amend.
All right.
Okay, so you want to vote on this, and then we'll still have questions on the other thing, or,
However y'all want to do it.
I mean, I'm for this, but I have some other questions that I didn't get to finish on the other paper.
Okay, Ms. Cindy, we're gonna, any other questions before we move on? Call for a vote
Okay, so what are we voting
So-
exactly?
on his
Again,
amendment.
The motion is just to allow the administration to send out the request for applications with the instruction sheet and application that was presented.
Is that what you have, Ms. Cindy?
Need to have them all.
For the 7 Phase 2 projects and the small pool application, the small application pool.
Okay.
Now, do you need to put in your amendment to bring it back to the board? Does that need to be on the amendment?
And, well, yes.
So are these applicants going to be following the instructions and the
Yes.
procedures as written?
Not the procedures.
Not the procedure.
Yeah.
Just, they gotta fill out the
The instruction.
application and send the application back to the administration.
Here's the instruction committee.
Yeah, I think that you need to bring back to the board in your motion.
Yeah, and that, I will add to, that my motion would also require, that,
Board approval.
that the administration's recommendation,
Would need board approval.
would need board approval. Before, hiring any of these professionals.
There you go.
Do you see the motion on the screen, Mr. Duncan?
No, so motion to approve the administration to issue RFQs with the instruction sheet and application from the agenda.
Not including guidelines.
Not including guidelines and procedures.
That final, you can just say, period. The results from the RFQ will come back before the board for final approval, for final review and approval.
Come back to the board for final approval.
We lawyered it again. We lawyered it again.
Okay. Okay, and kind of like refresh it. Oh, yeah, it's up there.
Perfect.
Was that good?
Is that good, everyone?
Perfect.
All right, call for a vote, Ms. Cindy.
Is there any public input on the motion?
Public.
Voting is now open.
Can we gotta We got to call for public.
Is there any public input on this before we vote?
Call to vote.
Call to vote.
Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. Motion passes unanimously.
That's it. That's all it is.
Is there any other, okay, Ms. Rose, go ahead with your question.
Okay, so since we're not technically voting on this procedure tonight, I'm going to get with you and Mr. Brett on my suggestions instead of going over that now. But I do have some questions to what Mr. McNeely said a few minutes ago about, we had actually approved Phase 2 already in our September meeting, and you said you got it on a pause, but the board had already approved hiring our contractors we should be out for bid, in other words, on the 3 of those projects right now. So I want to know where we're at on that and when we're going to start moving forward, or what is your plan? Because this board approved on September the 20th to contract with the architects for design work and to go out for bids.
Okay, so, there's a capital outlay meeting.
Wednesday at 5 o'clock.
Wednesday, 5 o'clock.
Yeah, next Wednesday at 5 o'clock, we're gonna do that. If you look at the agenda, every project, we're gonna go through every project.
Okay, good.
Get an update on it, get a reason what we're doing, and to make sure that we're moving forward with what we can move forward with, and make sure that we're on the right track. Because there's I know we're talking about doing this, but there's other issues that we don't have policies in place as far as the construction, because we haven't done a lot of construction, I guess, in the past. But the procedures on this construction where we approve these plans during the process, and not just, we don't just vote at the beginning and say we're approving a $5 million project, and then 12 months later we get a bill for $7.5 million or whatever it is. There's steps along the way that we have to put in place to we make sure that the construction is what we as a board are wanting to construct. So we're going to cover that in capital outlay.
Okay, with the contract, I mean, we did a contract with
Correct.
already. We approved the board for them to do the contract to draw up Phase 2 and to go out for bids, and then they would come back to us, and it's in the minutes.
Right, we'll cover that
So,
in capital
but we've
outlay.
not done any of that, and we're just on hold. That's what I'm saying. It's
And
been
that's-
months.
But that's why we're having the capital outlay.
But the board already approved it. So, I mean, we would have to go back to the board and unapprove it, which I don't think that's what we want to do. I think we need to move forward. We've already hired these people
Right,
to
you're-
draw the
You are
designs.
correct, and nobody's debating whether we hired the architects to do Phase 2 now we got to figure out if that's where we're continuing with that process, if these RFQs, if the architects are the same ones that we hired to start with, all that's going to come out, and we'll cover each individual one in the capital outlay.
Right.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it's still not, I mean, I don't understand how you can go back. If we've approved to hire the architects to draw them up and to make a design, we've paid them for those designs. We haven't seen the designs to even approve them or not
That's
approve them.
exactly
But
right.
that's what we're saying is.
But we've already hired them to do all Phase 2. We've already approved them
And
to
that-
proceed.
But
and
that's
go
what
out
he's
for
saying,
bids.
that the capital outlay, it's not saying that we're gonna change architect, it's saying, where are we at, and what do we need to do next?
But
On
the-
every project that we have.
I just hate to keep beating the dead horse here, but the motion said for them to go out for bids, to come back to go out for bids, and we're not doing that. And now we're gonna start over. They should be bidding those buildings now that we've already approved, is what I'm saying. If you wanna move forward, move forward, but we can't go back.
We approve Phase 2 projects. You
Yeah.
are correct.
I am eager to hear the update at our Wednesday.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and how we're going to move this along.
That's gonna be a good meeting.
All right. Anybody else? Any other comments on this? That's it? All right. Policy Committee is adjourned.